Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Lighter, Brighter, Clearer, More. 4 ways to lift your spirit. I'm Josh Malkin from the Leeds Kindness Revolution, and I'm joined today by Ahmad, Taoist philosopher, author, and leading practitioner of classical 5-element acupuncture. Welcome, Ahmad. It's a long time since we first met, when we were both volunteers at the Leeds Youth Theatre Workshop. I think you were at Leeds University and I was at Leeds Art College.
1969. I was doing a postgraduate degree in education.
Yeah, and weren't you doing a teacher training at one of the schools in Leeds?
Well, I guess that was part of it.
Yeah.
That was part of it. You know, I was involved with the school, but yeah.
Yeah, and it was amazing because Interplay Community Theatre, which came out of that, actually is still going in Armley.
Yeah.
And we are too. Anyway, thank you ever so much for doing this interview. I thought it would be helpful for you to share some of your expertise with people about the way that you work with your clients. And I wonder whether you could just describe a little bit about how you got involved in health and your interest in, ancient Chinese medicine, for example.
Yeah, I think I've always been interested in health, and I even saw. I used to teach college in Toronto, teach drama, but I saw it as a kind of liberation process, you know, as a really, you know, people opening up, becoming who they really are more. And so I think it's always been health related. And then I got interested in acupressure massage back in the mid-70s. And in one way or another, that led me to learning about a college in Britain, College of Traditional Acupuncture, in Royal Leamington Spa, headed by this man, Dr. J.R. Worsley, who really was an inspired genius and was really steeped in the inner tradition of classical acupuncture, which really appealed to me, especially because there were no books in the training.
So you say there were no books in the training. What did you have to do?
Well, it was all, everything was shared just orally. And we spent a lot of time working with our senses, you know, in order to diagnose.
So it's about observation, observing.
Well, being present in a certain way. So in the training, you could pass all the exams, they would still fail you if they felt that the way you were being present didn't really help create change, or didn't affect some kind of resonance or development for the patient. Yeah, so it was a very, very different place from any other college.
And my understanding is that Professor Worsley actually travelled the East and reconstituted, put together the different traditions of acupuncture from an incredibly in-depth study, and it was his life commitment, as I understand.
Yeah, I think he received what I would call a transmission when he was in the RAF in the Second World War. He was a physiotherapist, and there was a guy in the squadron doing acupuncture. And as soon as he saw that, he just knew. And something happened inside him, and that led him to China and Japan after the war, where in a sense he was looking for what he already knew. You know, I mean, he knew it in some deep, deep way, but he didn't know it as a practice or as a knowledge. Yeah. And that's what he got in China and Japan, and came back with that.
And would you just, for me and also other people listening, just describe the difference between classical 5-element acupuncture, which is, I think, the tradition that you learned from him, and that's in Britain and North America now, and other forms of acupuncture, just for a point of differentiation, a way of differentiating the way that you work.
Yeah, I don't want to emphasize too much about that. You know, I remember Dr. Worsley saying there are no churches in acupuncture.
Okay.
And, you know, I really agree with that, you know, whatever works. But again, it comes from that place of, you know, if you meet a practitioner, do you connect? Do you feel a resonance? Doesn't matter really what they're doing. If you feel that connection, then stay with that person. Doesn't matter what the theory is. But I guess one thing would be that the classical work was really based on relationship with the patient. That was the key. And also a sense that there is a depth to human life, which is most significant, because it's that depth that's been disturbed, weakened, shattered by modern life, you know, just the way we live. And so we were there to try and make a connection at well, really at whatever level the person was, but including all of that, not just the physical, not just the mental, but also a kind of spirit level practice. And one of our, you know, the mantra at the college was, the needle is not the point. The needle is not the point, it's the relationship.
So you were at one point writing something called Acupuncture Without Needles. I wonder whether you could just explain how do you explain how acupuncture works to people who don't know very much, and why sometimes it can involve needles and why sometimes it doesn't have to.
Yeah, well, how long have we got, you know? The point is that there's nothing in the needle. It's just a piece of stainless steel. So the ancient Chinese emphasis was there are these places, what they called cave-like spaces. We call them acupuncture points, but that really doesn't describe what they're like. But there are these spaces which you can connect with, you can reach as a practitioner, but you have to have that relationship with the patient where something is moving, something is opening. So you can't go into a treatment session with some prescriptive approach, you know, that you know what's going on and so on and so forth. You don't know what's going on, and you're going to sit there until something comes through the patient. And my teacher, Dr. Worsley, would say, Mother Nature will speak through the patient. And our job is just to listen and understand what Mother Nature wants us to do, and then we do it. So what are we doing? We're connecting. We're going to a meeting place with a kind of fundamental reality within a person that has to do with not just their physical body, but their mind, their spirit as well.
So my understanding is that this is about rebalancing the energy within the body, and the observation over thousands of years that the Chinese undertook of what how nature worked in the human person. Is that a fair summary, or would you put it differently?
Yeah, no, I think you could put it that way. There's a certain incoherence that can start to establish itself, and so the person comes in with whatever complaints they've got, but those are just symptoms. That it's not the reality what's going on underneath, and so it's possible, really, even just with conversation, and conversation is really important in our work, that things can open up between you and the patient. That's the key thing. And then when things have opened up, when there's an effective change in that way, then you can insert a needle in a place that connects with what's been happening in that conversation. So you're really joining with something. You're linking up and joining with something. And I'm trying to keep it simple here.
It's fine. I was just going to say that when you say that it's really about relationship and joining, and you're talking about the meeting place, it sounds as though people who aren't acupuncturists, who simply make you feel better, have the ability somehow to do that.
We all have the ability to do it.
Yeah. Would you like to say a little bit more about what you see as the meeting place?
Yeah. If we can understand that the point is not to try and do something. There's a tendency for practitioners to think, oh, my job is to heal this person, or and the patient kind of thinks that way too. But it isn't really. It's to go and meet them where they are. So, for example, many years ago, I was treating an elderly woman, a friend of my mother-in-law's. She was in really bad shape, very depressed. Husband had died, just living in darkness, really. And so she wasn't at I mean, physically she had some issues. Mentally, she was fine. She was completely coherent. She could communicate, but her eyes were dead. There was no life in her eyes. So at this level of the spirit, she was dead. And so I immediately went to that level within myself of the spirit, went down into myself, because I had to meet her where she was. So that's a form of meeting place. There's no point going in at the mental level where you're just chatting about something when the person just isn't there. They're so devastated that they can't, that's not where they are. They're at this deeper level. And so I went to that level, and in that level, then it became clear to me what the acupuncture point was that I needed to use. So I mean, I had this body of knowledge and so on, but again, it wasn't prescriptive. It was just waiting for something to come into my consciousness. And because she was so dead, I mean, the point that came up was a point called spirit burial ground.
Yeah, right? They have also these amazing names for these acupuncture points, don't they?
Yeah, and it's not just poetic. It's like the spirit was dead. It was buried. And so I didn't tell her what I was doing, but I straight away went to use spirit burial ground. But I have to say that I went to that level within myself, met myself at the level of the spirit, met the needle at the level of the spirit, met the point at the level of the spirit, and used that point. And afterwards, when I saw her the next time, I'm trying to cut things short here. I didn't tell her what I did, but when I saw her, she said, oh, after that treatment, and she already looked better just after that treatment. She said, I had a dream, and I had this dream 50 years ago. So I knew we'd covered 50 years in the treatment. And I said, oh, what happened 50 years ago? So I said, what happened in the dream? And she said, well, in the dream, I entered a cemetery. Well, I'd needled spirit burial ground. And she said, I entered the cemetery, and in the cemetery, there's an open grave. In the open grave, there's my mother, very much alive. And she's annoyed. She's cross with me. She's telling me off. What is she telling you off about? I don't know. And so I said, so you were about 14 then? Yes. What happened? My mother died. And then a lot of things fell into place, because I realized that that was what it was all about. What was going on for her now was about that. And it was actually when her husband died that it was a catalyst for all that had not been, in a sense, allowed to be grieved when she was 14, and just at a critical time for her as a young woman, you know, a girl becoming a woman. And so once we understood that and got into that, then everything flowed from that. Everything flowed. Whatever treatments we needed to do, we did. And then she moved home. She just completely flowered. She moved home. She started teaching a form of art that she really loved. And there you go.
So in terms of this meeting point that you're speaking about, you're actually talking about, it's not simply about meeting socially or meeting someone else. I suppose you could apply it to the idea of meeting people respectfully and being present with them, but you're also talking about meeting yourself in this.
Yeah.
Is that correct? I mean, I wonder if you could say, well, how do I meet myself?
Well, it's there has to be, you know, we've all got a body, we've all got a mind, we've all got a spirit, and we know when we're in a spirit level. For example, it could be we hear a piece of music, we see our grandchild smiling, you know, we see a dawn, we see a dusk, something moves within us. It's beyond the mind. It's just a deep feeling of connection, and so that's the key. You know, where are those deep places of connection? And you know, what is it that inspires us? It doesn't have to be something that's alive. It could be something from the past. It could be fictional. It could be anything. But there'll be things that inspire us, have inspired us, have moved us, especially when we were children. And to you know, pay attention to that and just see where it takes you when you pay attention to it.
So in this current time, when people have been in lockdown, when we're faced with this incredible change, a lot of people are feeling incredibly challenged, feeling actually hope is a difficult idea sometimes for some people and in some places. And I'm just wondering whether you could just say a little bit about this time that we're going through and what can people do for themselves to move them into this place of the meeting point and beyond it to a place where you've described a treatment. I'm presuming you're saying that we don't need to be acupuncturists to do this.
No, we don't. We just have to be human beings, which we are. And what, you know, one of the problems is that we have to have some form of economic security right now. People need to be able to survive. It's very, very difficult to focus on anything if you don't know where the next, you know, pound is coming from, or it's impossible. It's too difficult. So having said that, it's really a matter of the heart and nourishing the heart. What is the heart about? And one of the problems that we face now is that we tend to put a lot of energy into stuff out there, even programs that are good. But the energies, you know, our energy is going out, out, out. And that's not good if that is all we do, because what we're actually putting out is a form of warmth. And just as we're creating climate change by putting, you know, firing up the atmosphere, you know, with all the stuff we do, and everything is fired up, you know, and it's creating climate change. We can end up doing the same if we're attached to everything out there. So there has to be a balance of paying attention to in here, which means slowing things down, dialing things down. Do we have the patience? This is what the Taoists would ask. Do you have the patience to let your muddy water settle and let the solutions just arise by themselves? You don't have to make something happen, but you have to position yourself in a way that can allow that to happen. And unfortunately, we don't. We panic. We're frightened. We're very apprehensive because we've actually lost a certain kind of confidence in ourselves just through the way we live. So the solution to that is to nourish the heart, which is by stopping doing things periodically, just stopping, just or going for a walk where you don't know where you're going to go. I went out on my bike just the other day with no idea where I was going to go. I just let go of the reins and let my bike take me wherever. Now, obviously, I don't do that all the time. Sometimes I have to go on my bike to do my shopping, but I also create space for me just to wander, you know, and be surprised and be right in the moment. Then I'm right in the moment. I'm not in my head. I'm not thinking, oh, I've got to do this and I've got to do that. No, I'm just letting things drift. I'm letting go of the reins. And one of the problems is we're holding on the reins too tightly. And what all of that does is it prevents warmth getting to the heart. And I mean, I could go on about the heart forever, but one of the consequences, a significant consequence of that, is it will produce depression, anxiety. It will produce a difficulty in being intimate, in empathy, in compassion. It will strengthen cruelty and abuse. It will, catastrophic thinking, despair. All of these things come because the heart is not being nourished. And the way we can nourish the heart is just to slow things down and just spend time. I mean, it's so simple. It sounds so simple, so ridiculous, but actually to sit on a park bench where you just listen. You're not using your eyes so much. You're just listening. But when you're listening, that actually strengthens the heart far more than looking does, you know, and just sitting, listening. And so I'll do that. I mean, I go off and I just find a bench and I sit there for like an hour and a half. And I'm doing absolutely nothing, No idea what I'm doing, but I am listening.
So you have this concept of nourishing life, which comes from the ancient Chinese traditions, and I wonder whether you could say a little bit more about that, and then we'll perhaps go on to these four elements that you were talking about earlier, about lighter, brighter, clearer, more. Do you want to just talk about nourishing life a little bit?
Yeah. Well, it's really about what have been called in the ancient time true principles or reality or life, and that is things like the seasons. So, for example, we're in the summer, and so it is very, very difficult for people right now because the whole point of the summer is to be able to just be out there. Just to be out there. So although people are in some ways doing very risky things in hanging out together, out there, sunbathing, being with friends and family, in another way, it's completely appropriate for the summer. That's why it's so difficult. It's not just a matter of lack of discipline. It's actually almost like a biological need to be outside, to be relaxing, and so on. You know, that does nourish the heart. The real risk is that given the situation right now of COVID, you're going to make the situation 10 times worse. So it's a really, really difficult situation to engage with. But nourishing life is about going with the seasons, which we don't do. If it's dark, switch the light on. If it's cold, turn the heat up, and so on. We don't live with nature. We kind of bypass nature, but we have to start living with nature. And the autumn is about calming and settling down and going. Just as the sap descends into the roots, we need to start descending into ourselves more, as best we can, given the nature of our lives, you know. But if you identify yourself through doing, I do, therefore I am, which most of us do, then it becomes very difficult, very, very difficult. But you have to start somewhere. And so even if you're just creating a little bit of time for yourself, for example, you've been at work, you're going to go home, take some transition time. It could just be 15 minutes, half an hour, where you stop somewhere, a place that you like, preferably where there's nature, where there's a tree or some flowers, or you can hear birdsong, and you just sit there 10, 15 minutes. And it just allows something to start rebalancing within you after you've been engaged in all the responsibilities and all the service you've been putting in through your work or whatever. You know, people don't do that. They don't take transition time. And it's really, really important because you never get any balance. And in the end, you're just waiting for those couple of weeks in the summer when you can disappear into some foreign place with a beach, you know. But you could have been doing it every day in a way for 15 minutes.
So what you're saying really is that the culture that we live in isn't a conducive environment for health and well-being.
Yeah, we need to understand that. Not in a kind of doomsville way, but just this is the situation we're facing and we have to change it.
But we can do things ourselves. And
yeah.
This is why I was interested in your phrase, lighter, brighter, clearer, more. You know, when we're faced with a situation where we don't feel okay, which isn't light, which isn't bright, which isn't clear, and seems somehow less, obviously we're going to feel pretty, well, not so great. And I'm just wondering whether you can just talk about how we can get engaged with that simple phrase in our own lives.
Well, it's through the body. I mean, everybody's experienced it where you can be in a situation and it doesn't feel good in one way or another. It feels narrower, darker, heavier, less in some way. Narrower, darker, heavier, less. And since life is about life, it's not about death, as it were, then we don't want to go into situations that are narrower, darker, heavier, less. They are anti-life. And some situations we're just stuck with, you know, momentarily or for a time. But at least if we can recognize, hey, this doesn't actually work for me, you know. And it could be a relationship. It could be work. It could be how I'm actually relating to my kids. You know, how I'm relating to my parents. If I'm engaged in a way which is not producing a lightness, an ease, almost like an effortlessness, then there's something wrong. We're not wrong. It's not us. We're not wrong. It's just when we have these experiences, it's feedback. It's just feedback to tell us, no, this is not the right way with this situation. You need to change this. You need to look at it. And it can be changed in little ways, just like I described that transition time, you know, or, too much, I've got too much invested in this situation. Why am I so invested in this situation? Do I really need to be? You know, if I'm getting no return. I remember a patient who, she just invested so much in her mother. Her mother hated her. Her mother wouldn't have cared if she dropped dead the next minute. And so it's like, why are you investing? Well, I want that love. I'm constantly trying to get love from my mother. Well, you're not going to get it from that mother, but there's a mother within you who cares about you, who is right there for you and will comfort you if you care to turn within yourself. Or other people, not your own mother, not your biological mother. It could be somebody else. If you think about it, oh, that's who I feel a motherly thing from. It needn't even be a woman. It could be a man, you know. It could even be a child. It could be a dog.
So what you're saying, Ahmad, is that we can take responsibility for being kinder to ourselves by being aware simply of what makes us feel lighter, brighter,
Yes.
clearer, more.
Yeah, it's a felt experience, and we tend to live in our heads, so we've got to get beyond that. But that is a kind of, living in our heads is not natural. It's a trained process, through living in the kind of modern world we live in. But underneath that, we know very well. I mean, what are we drawn to? We just have to look what we're drawn to, what inspires us, what moves us to tears, what makes us laugh, and so on and so forth. Those are the real things. I mean, I like sharpening all my colored pencils. and you think, well, you think that's ridiculous. But if it makes me feel lighter, brighter, clearer, more, why not?
Yeah. But sometimes, to go towards what feels light and away from what feels narrower and takes a lot of courage.
Yes. Well,
how do we handle that?
Well, I would say if we start with trust, so trust is not a feeling, it's a decision. So where we're all going to say, I don't know what the hell's going on. I don't know what the next 5 minutes is going to produce, but I'm going to trust. I'm making a decision to trust that if I can just go with the flow of it, go with life, that things will start to pan out and work out as they should. And they will. I mean, they will do that. I mean, if you look at a flower, if you look at a daffodil, everything is there for it to grow, nutrients in the earth, sun, warmth, and so on. It's all there. And in the same way, it's all there for us as well. And we can trust that it is, that we're not alone. We are not alone. We are also part of this biosphere. We're part of the planetary purpose, if you like. We're there. But if we start taking paths that take us away from ourselves, into our heads, into, because I have this job, that makes me significant or something, then we start losing that connection. That's the point. But it's a contrived situation from the training from our being babies onwards, but we just have to start doing that less. And it all takes time, and courage is necessary, because there's no easy way, really, in that sense. But to have the courage to go for it, to say, yeah, I'm going to, because let's face it, if everything else we've tried doesn't work, right? So if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. If you invest in something and get no return, why would you keep investing in it? Yeah. But we have to reach a point where we start losing the capacity to hang on to these desperate, terrible ways that the culture offers us. So a lot of what people are facing isn't problems with themselves. It really isn't problems with themselves. It's problems with the way of life that we live, and which is a terrible way of life in many ways. And the fact that we make the best of it, and the fact that we still create lives where we have meaningful relationships and so on, to me, it's a continual miracle that people are able to do that, and gives me even more confidence in the capacity of human beings to make a far better world than the one we live in. Absolutely.
So in terms of creating a kinder world, which is what the festival's about, in terms of creating a kinder city, which is also what the festival's about, and about creating a kinder relationship with ourselves and the world around us. If you like, your version of the 5 ways to well-being is your 4 ways to well-being, which is just whatever feels lighter, whatever feels brighter, whatever feels clearer and more, go towards it rather than away from it.
Yeah, go towards that and make a decision to trust that process. And you'll be amazed. People will be amazed. I mean, it's the way I live, and I've seen it borne out over and over again, and it's the heart of what I do with patients as well. And because it's so meaningful, you know, for them, because I'm not telling them something they don't really know. I'm just telling them something they really do know, but they ignore it, or they don't have the language to actually describe it, you know, and so then we start sharing in that way.
So you're saying that we all have the wisdom within us.
We do.
If we can just trust that, and if we can clearly go towards what's a simple way of looking at things in terms of what makes us feel okay. But can I just ask you one last thing? How do you tell the difference between something that's lighter, brighter, clearer, more, and when we're being self-indulgent?
Well, I think we just have to take that risk.
Okay.
Self-indulgence.
You know, like,
I think it's okay to be self-indulgent.
I'm just saying that, you know, if we're tempted by food that doesn't serve us, or things that seem shiny, I mean, it's a different kind of thing, isn't it?
Yes, but I remember a patient who didn't eat this, didn't eat that, was on this diet, that diet. Her gastrointestinal system was screwed up in one way or another. Mm. And I realized that she almost had like a Puritan life, you know.
Okay.
And I said, look, what I want you to do when you leave, I said, if you could eat or drink anything, what would you eat and drink? And straight away she said, chocolates and Kahlua, the cure. I said, okay, when you leave this office, I want you to go and buy some chocolates, buy some Kahlua, and then give me a call in a couple of days and tell me how you're doing. And she said, so is this part of the treatment? I said, yes, this is part of the treatment, because in that moment, I had a certain authority, as it were, for her as the practitioner, as the health practitioner. Anyway, she phoned me back in a couple of days and said, I don't know what you're doing. I don't know what you did. She said, but I felt marvelous. So it's not that, you know, continual self-indulgence, but most of us aren't in that situation. In fact, we're in the opposite situation of feeling overly responsible, overly vigilant about things, guilty, lacking in confidence, nervous, scared. You know, it's really, you know, the overindulgence is not really an issue, I don't think. I think if you're focused more around the heart, if you're focused around lighter, brighter, clearer, more, you will start to just naturally help a balance restore itself within you. And I mean, I was down. I have a restaurant down below where I live, which is great. And I went down and I had a pint of beer with a friend, and it was absolutely delicious, and I loved it. But I'm not going to drink beer every day. You know, I drink very little alcohol, actually. Usually I drink non-alcoholic beer. But I was with my friend and we were discussing that most important thing, poetry, and having a beer, you know. And that's as good as any treatment anywhere. And I encourage everybody to go out and do that right now.
So what you're really saying is focusing on lighter, brighter, clearer, more, but experimenting at the same time. So if you're focusing on something and you experiment and you're over drinking because it seemed brighter at the time and you find that it wasn't, then you just basically reset and go for what seems, you know, as you say, coming from the heart rather than coming from the head.
Well, there'll be times when we just don't have the capacity to rise.
Yeah.
You know, and if we can just acknowledge it and just be able to say to ourselves, I just don't have it today. I really don't. I just have to stare at the wall for, you know, hours, you know, just stare at the wall for hours, because the issue isn't what we do. It's the way we relate to ourselves when we're doing whatever we're doing. And we tend to say, oh, this is good, this is bad, you know, this is a healthy way of relating, this is an unhealthy way of relating. And in a certain way, there's a truth about that. But we have to have that compassion for ourselves. We have to have that acknowledgement that life is very, very challenging, especially these days. I could go into that forever and ever. But it is. It's really challenging. So if at times we just, oh, you know, I think I just need to slump. But if I can recognize that I'm doing that, you know, and generally we find we come out of that slump. So there are natural rhythms about ourselves, you know, daily rhythms, seasonal rhythms, you know, circumstantial rhythms. I mean, they're there, and we can trust it. We can trust it. We'll come through it. We'll come through it. And I think we need to stop doing this mental kind of vigilance. Is this correct? Is this not correct? You know, is this healthy? Is this not healthy? Because it's that's the problem. And it puts too much, and this is a process out there actually. So it's putting too much heat into this. And of course, we're doing all the media stuff. I mean, I've got friends who, during COVID-19, for them it's like, oh, I can do more. I can do more meditation. I can do more Zooming with my XR friends locally and nationally and internationally and so on. And I'm saying, well, that's all fine, but can't you also include it in that just stopping? Just stopping.
Well, talking about just stopping, we're going to end this conversation shortly, but thank you ever so much for your insights. And I think I'm taking away what I can do in my life, which is, of course, very busy and very much about doing. And just, for example, focusing on something that I haven't done for a very long time, which is painting.
Yes.
I got out my easel the other day and thought, you know, I used to do this, I'm going to have another go. And I think it's really simple things like that in terms of what feeds our enthusiasm and finding that enthusiasm wherever it is in our lives.
But the interesting thing, Josh, is that just came up. It just came up inside you.
Yeah.
You know, to think about painting. And I'm saying, you know, when we're positioning ourselves around reality, those things will tend to happen more, and we'll be drawn to do them. You know, but yes, it's not so much the particular activity; it's that we're positioning ourselves. So when that happens, you know that you've positioned yourself in relationship to reality better. And it's like,
so
oh, that's interesting.
So we can't go away and read a book about lighter, brighter, clearer, more. It's already with us. We already know.
Yeah, let's get away from this prescriptive approach to things, you know, agendas. And yes, I mean, of course, you've got work to do. You've got things that we all have. We've all got responsibilities. And it would be negligent of us to ignore them. But that's not the point. The point is just creating the balance. A doctor friend of mine years ago said, for every hour in the clinic, an hour in the forest.
And some of us don't have a lot of forest around us, but I take your beanie. So there are parks, some great parks in Leeds. So
buy a plant.
Yeah.
You know, grow some tomatoes. I've got tomatoes on my balcony.
Yeah, well, there's lots of things we can do which are available wherever we're drawn to what feels lighter, brighter, clearer, more. And thank you ever so much. I always enjoy our conversations, and I thought it was worth sharing this conversation with other people as part of the festival, because in terms of taking care of ourselves and being kindest to ourselves, I think lighter, brighter, clearer, more is a great way of looking at things. Thank you ever so much, Ahmad, and we'll share ways that people can get in touch with you if they want to contact you in any way.